My alien roommate went into heat. We couldn't leave during lockdown. The apartment door sealed with a heavy click, and the red light above the frame blinked 3 times before holding steady like a warning no one wanted to see, but everyone had been expecting for weeks now. And Lisa Morgan pressed her forehead against the cool metal and let out a long breath that fogged the surface, because this was it now, locked in for who knew how long, with supplies that might last a month, if they were careful. And a roommate who was definitely not human. Zara stood in the middle of their small living room with her tall, lean frame, casting strange shadows under the fluorescent lights, in her skin, which normally shimmered with a soft blue undertone now, seemed to pulse with something deeper and more urgent, like bioluminescent waves rolling under the surface, and her 4-fingered hands clenched and unclenched at her sides, while her large dark eyes with their double lids blinked rapidly in that way. That meant she was stressed or worried, or both. Lisa had been living with Zara for almost 6 months now, ever since the Galactic Council had opened Earth to their student exchange program, and humans had jumped at the chance to learn from alien civilizations, even if it meant housing visitors who needed special atmospheric regulators and ate foods that smelled like burnt rubber and honey mixed together. And Zara had been a good roommate, all things considered, quiet and clean, and always willing to split the bills evenly, even though she made way more money than Lisa did with her remote tech job for some company 3 star systems away. But now, with the lockdown in effect because of the outbreak spreading through the city, forcing everyone to shelter in place for an indefinite period, and all the warnings on the news about not breaking quarantine under any circumstances, things were about to get complicated in ways Lisa had not prepared for at all. The first sign came that evening when Zara refused to eat dinner and instead paced back and forth across the living room from the window overlooking the empty street to the kitchen counter and back again, over and over, with a restless energy that made Lisa nervous, because Zara was never restless. She was always calm and measured in everything she did. "Are you okay?" Lisa asked from her spot on the couch, where she had been pretending to read the same page of her book for 20 minutes while actually watching Zara move like a caged animal, and the question hung in the air between them, heavy with concerns. Stopped mid-pace and turned to look at her, and something in her eyes had changed. They were darker now, almost black instead of their usual deep purple, and her pupils had dilated so wide they almost swallowed the color entirely, and when she spoke, her voice came out rough and strained, like she was fighting to form the words "I am experiencing a biological cycle that occurs once every solar year," she said, and her hands gripped the back of the armchair hard enough that Lisa heard the wood frame creak under the pressure. "And I did not anticipate it would begin during this lockdown period, and I apologize for any disruption this may cause." Lisa set her book down and sat up straighter, because that sounded like something important, and probably something she should have been informed about before they got sealed in together for weeks. But there was no point in being upset about it now, when they were stuck with whatever was happening. "What kind of cycle?" she asked, keeping her voice calm and neutral, the way she did when dealing with difficult customers at her old retail job before the pandemic had shut everything down and left her scrambling for remote work. Zara's skin flashed a deeper shade of blue. It's almost purple, and she looked away toward the window where the streetlights were starting to flicker on in the gathering dusk, and when she answered, her voice was barely above a whisper. "My species enters a reproductive state that humans would likely compare to what you call heat," she said, and the words came out fast, like she wanted to get them over with quickly. "And it involves heightened physical responses, increased hormone production, and strong urges that can be difficult to manage without a mate present." Lisa said, and then said it again because her brain needed a moment to process this information and figure out what it meant for their current situation, locked in a small 2-bedroom apartment with no way out and no way for Zara to go anywhere else or be with anyone who could help her through whatever this was. Zara turned back to face her, and her expression was tight with embarrassment and something else that might have been fear or worry, and she spoke again before Lisa could formulate a proper response. "We'll remain in my room as much as possible," she said, "and I have medication that can help reduce the symptoms, but it is not completely effective, and I may be irritable or behave strangely for the next several days, and I ask for your patience and understanding during this time." Lisa nodded slowly and tried to think of what a good roommate would say in this situation, because this was definitely not covered in any apartment living guide she had ever read, and Zara looked miserable standing there with her shoulders hunched and her skin flickering with colors that Lisa had learned meant distress. "It's okay," she said finally, and stood up from the couch to move closer, but not too close because she was not sure what the boundaries were anymore, "and we will figure it out together, and if you need anything, just let me know, all right?" Zara's expression softened slightly, and she nodded once before retreating quickly to her bedroom and closing the door behind her with a soft click that somehow felt louder than it should have, and Lisa was left standing alone in the living room, wondering what she had just gotten herself into. The next morning started badly when Lisa woke to the sound of something crashing in the kitchen, and she stumbled out of bed, still half asleep, to find Zara standing amid broken dishes on the floor, and her hands were shaking as she tried to pick up the pieces, and her skin was so bright now it almost hurt to look at directly. "I apologize," Zara said without looking up, and her voice sounded wrong, pitched higher than normal and strained, "and I did not mean to wake you." Lisa grabbed the broom from the closet and gently moved Zara aside because the alien woman looked like she might cut herself on the sharp ceramic fragments with the way her hands were trembling, and she swept up the mess while Zara stood against the counter with her arms wrapped around herself. "How are you feeling?" Lisa asked, even though the answer was pretty obvious from the way Zara looked like she might vibrate right out of her skin. "Not well," Zara admitted, and she closed her eyes and took several deep breaths that seemed to help center her a little bit. "And the medication is less effective than I hoped, and my body temperature is rising, and I am experiencing significant discomfort." Lisa dumped the broken dish pieces in the trash and put the broom away, and then did something that surprised both of them by stepping close and putting a gentle hand on Zara's arm, and the alien skin was indeed warmer than normal, almost hot to the touch, and it pulsed with that strange inner light. "What can I do to help?" she asked, and meant it because they were stuck here together, and there was no point in Zara suffering alone if there was anything that could make it easier. Zara opened her eyes and looked at Lisa with an expression that was hard to read, but might have been gratitude mixed with something else, and she was quiet for a long moment before speaking in. "My culture," she said, slowly, and her voice dropped to that low register again. "Physical contact can help manage the symptoms, and presence of another being provides comfort and grounding, but I do not wish to impose on you or make you uncomfortable with such requests." Lisa thought about that for a moment while Zara watched her with those impossibly dark eyes, and outside the apartment the city was locked down and empty, and they had no idea when things would return to normal, and they were all each other had right now for however long this lasted. "Okay with that," Lisa said, and squeezed Zara's arm gently before letting go. "And if it helps, then we should try it. And we are friends, right? And friends help each other something." And Zara's expression cracked then, and she let out a breath that might have been relief or gratitude or both, and she nodded once and then again, and her skin flickered through several colors before settling on a deep blue that seemed more stable than the chaotic pulses from before. "Thank you," she said quietly, and the words carried weight that made Lisa's chest feel tight with an emotion she could not quite name. They spent the rest of that day on the couch together watching old movies that neither of them really paid attention to. And Lisa let Zara lean against her shoulder in the alien's body. The temperature stayed elevated but seemed to stabilize with the contact, and her breathing evened out into something more normal and less panicked. By the third day of lockdown, Lisa had learned more about Zaran biology than she ever expected to know, and Zara had explained between moments of lucidity that her species had evolved on a world where mates were scarce, and so their biology had adapted to make the reproductive cycle intense and all-consuming to ensure it could not be ignored when the opportunity arose. "But I have no mate here," Zara said, as they sat together on the living room floor, because she had gotten too restless for the couch and needed to move and pace, and Lisa had joined her on the floor to stay close, and so my body does not understand why the cycle continues without resolution, and it becomes more difficult each day. Lisa watched Zara move through a series of stretches that looked almost like yoga, but with more joints bending in directions that made her eyes